And joining us now on the debate, the major party candidates for the Toronto-Danforth by-election. In alphabetical order, Grant Gordon for the Liberals, Adriana Muñato-Hamu for the Greens, and Craig Scott for the NDP. The Conservatives are contesting this by-election, but despite repeated efforts on our part to have their candidate here tonight, their campaign hasn't returned our phone calls. We did get one terse email saying they wouldn't be participating, and from what we've heard, they're boycotting all of the candidates' debates. That's them. That takes nothing away from the fact that we're very glad that the three of you accepted our invitation to be here tonight. We're glad to see you all around the table. Let's just start, as I suggested in the intro, this is a more than average by-election, and we want to put some of the history, if you would, Michael, bring this up, some of the history as to what makes this area of Toronto so interesting. This riding actually was, under a different name, held by the Conservatives from 1935 to 1963. It has not gone Conservative once since 63, almost 50 years. But after that, the New Democrats held it under Bob Rae first, and then Lynn McDonald, and then Dennis Mills took it for a good chunk of time in the late 80s, all the way up until 2004, when, of course, Jack Layton won it for the NDP and became the party leader. What happened last time? In the federal election back on May the 2nd of last year, Jack Layton won it with 61% of the votes. That's a big lead that the NDP take into this by-election. Andrew Lang was the then Liberal candidate with 18%, the Conservatives at third, and Adriana, there you were, running last time as well with 6% coming in for the Greens. So here's the first question, and let's just go in the order in which they appeared last time. Craig, you first. This riding is accustomed to having some pretty big names representing it, whether it's George Hees for the Conservatives 50 years ago, Jack Layton, Bob Rae. Big names. What makes you think you got the chops to replace them?
Well, I think my background as a law professor at U of T and then Osgoode has prepared me well for it. I feel like I've contributed a lot to society, Canada, and internationally as well. And I can't say much more than that. It's up to the electorate to determine whether I have the ability. A lot of what I've been trying to do is talk to people at the door and get them to know me as a person. So that's a really important factor as well.
Grant, how would you answer that?
Well, I don't, yeah, there's some big names, definitely. Was Dennis Mills a big name when he started? I'm not sure about that, I don't think so, but he was a tremendous presence in the riding. And I think what people in Toronto-Danforth are really looking for is someone who is really connected to the place, knows the place, and can help solve problems.
Adriana.
I think it's not so much big names as forward thinking. I think the riding is very forward thinking, and I do think it's also very green. Going door to door, it's very clear to me that everybody does really want a green candidate, which is why this whole race has been about who's the most environmental. And it's very clear that the most environmental is a Green Party, and I think this riding may just elect the second Green and double the Green power in Parliament, because that's what this riding's all about.
Your victory would mean twice the number of members.
Let's face it, my victory would shake up Parliament much more than any of the others.
Grant, the results of the last election, and admittedly you weren't running then, and it's a different time today obviously than it was almost a year ago when that election was held, but the results suggest you've got a long way to come back. What makes you think you can?
Well, there was a poll done early on that was much similar to this one, the results. And I felt that when I started. People didn't recognize me necessarily across the riding. They didn't know me all that well. And I felt the doors at the beginning didn't open very widely or very quickly. And I can feel, this is a little bit like Seabiscuit, I can feel every day that goes by, the doors are opening wider and wider, and I'm getting bigger grins and more interesting conversation. And I think it's going to turn out to be a really interesting finish.
Let's talk about those doors, because I always like to find out. You guys knock on whatever it is, 10,000 doors during the course of this thing, maybe more. What are you hearing at the doors?
I'm hearing mainly two things. One is, Adriana is absolutely correct. It's quite common to end up in conversations about the environment. Sometimes it's local issues, sometimes it's national global warming is brought up a lot. But beyond that, there's a commonality that many people are talking about concerns and worries, and sometimes more than that, about the Conservative government. And there's something about the riding where I expect my colleagues are hearing things like that too. And the idea of holding Mr. Harper to account, holding his feet to the fire, as one of the functions of an official opposition, people get that, and they get that I have the background to help. It's already a really strong team up there. We're over 100 MPs who are set to keep him in check for the next 3 years.
What are you hearing at the door?
I'm not hearing one issue. There isn't one galvanizing issue out there. But yes, there are some kind of macro issues like global warming and robocalls. But what I'm really sensing is that families are getting squeezed, and it relates to all kinds of different issues. Lack of childcare. So you come across a young family and they can't find a spot in a daycare. So that's a big issue to them, and their family's getting squeezed. Family with a young person who's come out of college who can't find a job, that family's feeling pressure. Feeling pressure in a number of ways. This is a very diverse riding. So immigration issues, there are tons of cuts happening to immigration, to resettlement, English as a second language. So there are a lot of new Canadian families that are feeling the squeeze in that respect. So it's just a lot of different issues, but the squeeze is happening. Small business, the riding's fueled by small business. A lot of people in our riding own small businesses.
We should point that out for people who are watching outside Toronto. This is not the part of Toronto with a ton of skyscrapers.
There are no skyscrapers whatsoever. So there are a lot of independent stores, mom and pop shops throughout the riding, and those people are having a tough time.
Okay, Adriana, in this economy, you're really hearing environment as the number one issue at the door?
I'm hearing a lot of things. People are, I mean, yes, they do talk a lot about the environment. They're also talking about being squeezed. They're talking about unemployment. They're talking about the economy. They're talking about OAS comes up a lot. All kinds of things. But the economy is, the environment is a very strong thing. I just wanted to point out for Craig, who's talking about a strong opposition, that in fact, in this riding, it's very clear that we are going to elect an opposition member. And with the dynamics of Parliament being what it is, it actually doesn't matter which of us gets elected, because we all have to work together. And we have to peel some support from the Conservatives, which actually our party's been actually historically good at in other countries, at forming coalitions and working with other parties and getting help where it's needed. So actually, in terms of getting things beyond this Parliament, our party's pretty good at it, and I would be exceptional in terms of being able to represent this riding, not coming from a big party where I would be forced to fit into a very hierarchical, rigid, big party structure where I have to vote strictly along party lines and speak only when my leader lets me. I know my leader very well, and she'll let me speak whenever I want.
Grant?
I think it's really important who wins this election, because we need a really strong local leader, a community builder, but we also we need someone who can go to Ottawa and rattle Harper's cage, but also perform really well in committee. And that's a must. We need someone who's really going to stand up for the environment, but have the weight of a national party behind them, like the Liberals, like Stéphane Dion, etc.
They might say that a lawyer is best positioned to do that. This guy over here is a lawyer.
It's also the first time that Grant's even talked about what can be done in Parliament. Up until this point, it's all been local, so that's an interesting change in message.
No, well, that's interesting. No, what I have said was the role of an MP is not to go to Ottawa and read half-baked questions in question period. And a lot of people relate to me when I say that. You know, there are a lot of opposition MPs who stand up and read questions. It sounds like they've never even read it through the first time. Someone else has written it for them. They read it, they post it on their YouTube channel, and it feels like, oh, is that your contribution? Is that amounting to anything?
What's quite important to know is that the official opposition, it makes a difference in the way Parliament functions. I mean, it's true what Adriana says. There has to be a measure of party discipline. Both parties operate on that basis. But the opposition can actually propose. It's not just a matter of opposing. So two really good recent examples. One is the Aboriginal education motion that was unanimously adopted in the House that basically said we have to stop having discriminatory education funding for on-reserve Aboriginal kids. That was an NDP motion. The government's agreed to it, and now their feet is to the fire about delivering on it legislatively or policy-wise. And the second example,
that would have been taken care of if the Kelowna Accord had gone through.
And the second example is the...
His party didn't cancel Kelowna, though.
No, we didn't.
Well, they helped cancel it.
Yeah.
The Canadian...
They got together
By
and...
pulling the Parliament down, you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay. Craig, go ahead.
The Canadian people voted out a government that was scandal-ridden, and that's what happened. And
Oh, come on, Craig. It was scandal.
Absolutely scandal.
Okay, it was scandal-ridden.
We're talking about the Liberals of 2006.
Yeah, but 2006 election, some of what happened was that there was an investigation by the RCMP And this was broken open in the middle of an election, which is, I mean, the Elections Canada should have intervened and said this is absolutely not fair, because it really interfered with the election. That had a lot to do with who the Canadians voted for.
Can I bring this out, though, into a larger subject, which is,
Yeah.
let's never mind the election of 2006. Let's talk about the fact that, I think probably with the exception of your party, because nobody's found it, nobody's got squeaky clean virginal hands here, if I can put it that way. You know, the Conservatives are on the hot seat right now about their robocalls. The Liberals had to confess the other day, their member for Guelph admitted that he made some calls that probably crossed the line. You know, the New Democrats have been known in their day to get their elbows up and play some brass knuckle politics as well. Yes, everybody's done it. Come on.
If you want to give some really good examples, it's
About
not
dead people voting in elections, I think, you know,
Yeah.
listen, there's
let's just say
there's no virgins here
let-
at this table. That's what I'm trying to say.
let's just keep the recent problems of electoral politics in the hands where they belong, the Liberals and the Conservatives. If you can find anything that the NDP has been doing, I'm welcome to it.
Well,
Go ahead, you got anything?
I think there was something in the paper this morning, wasn't there? Isn't there an issue brewing in a riding in Toronto?
And that's all just talk points. It has absolutely nothing to do with any reality at all, right? So,
You want to be more specific about that?
Let's talk. I think they're allegations at this point. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about this riding. You know, none of us is responsible for any of that
Okay,
stuff.
but fair enough. But one of the things that's big in the
you know
news
what?
right now.
Craig wanted an example.
ahead.
I'll give you an example because it relates to our riding. And it was a few years ago, there was an NDP meeting, and it was supposed to be on parliamentary funds, and it was supposed to be about the environment, which is big in our riding. And a lot of NGOs were invited to it, and it turned out that it was an NDP fundraiser, which is absolutely wrong. And we contacted a lot of the NGOs and said, do you realize this is an NDP fundraiser? And my understanding was that it was using parliamentary funds as outreach to voters, and it ended up being an NDP fundraiser. I never asked to have that investigated, but those kinds of things, that's one specific example that I know of, but those kinds of things go on all the time.
And again,
any party that's in power tends to manipulate things that way.
I have no idea about that. So
I know,
all
and
I can
I'm
say
not,
is-
you know, I'm not
but-
criticizing you. I'm
but
just
to
saying
pick
that
up
that
on what Grant's
kind of
saying,
thing
I think
happens.
the point is, we're not seeing that in this election, and that's exactly what we want to have.
The one thing we know that the NDP had to do a climb down on was that a lot of the money they raised that was related to Jack Layton's death, they gave that money to the Broadband Institute, and then, or they had to give the money, I think, to the Broadband Institute because they realized that they raised it in such a way that was illegal otherwise. So they had to rethink that. I'm not sure anybody was charging malice aforethought, but they ended up having to climb down on that. Anyway, bottom line, we don't have a Conservative candidate here today. I want to remind everybody who tuned in late, the Conservatives have declined to participate today. Have they been on any of your neighborhood
They were
all-candidates
in the
meets?
first one.
In the very first one?
Yeah, they
but
were.
not
in the
since then.
second one as well?
The second,
One
the
at
school
a
one.
school as well.
One of the
And Mr. Keyes is a very mild-mannered, nice guy. I wish he'd joined us for the rest.
You know why he isn't?
No, I don't actually.
Okay. Is political ethics an issue that you're finding at the door?
Oh yes, I would say so.
People are bringing it up.
Absolutely. And the latest issue of the massive fraudulent calling is something people are bringing up. But Grant also brought up in one of our other debates that there is a degree of disaffection with politics more generally, and so you hear versions of that as well, for sure.
So 40% of the eligible voters in Canada don't vote. It's higher in our riding, not lower, and it's mostly young people. They're feeling disengaged, disenfranchised, disaffected, whatever the dis word you want to use is. And I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to young people who said, you guys are full of BS, you're all liars, I can't stand watching the news on TV, get out of my face. And those are the people I want to talk to. They're my favorite people in the world. And I hope I can reel them back into participating. I don't even care who they vote for.
Go ahead, what would you say though?
But can I finish this? I don't care who they vote for. I just know that if they all did vote, Stephen Harper wouldn't be in power.
Well, one of the more interesting
would.
things is I have to agree with Grant. It's extremely important that we have engagement or re-engagement with youth. And that's one of the exciting things I do find in the riding. I think the riding is at least in terms of those who've been engaging with us during this campaign. Yesterday we had 45,000 pieces of literature that we wanted to get out to every house in one day. And we had kids coming in from all across Ontario, including Brampton. We had school kids from all the different schools in the riding, organizing their friends. It was absolutely amazing. And so the kind of energy I'm seeing is provide some optimism, frankly, about that, and one has to build on it.
Okay, let me ask you all, I know none of you is running for Toronto City Council, you're all running for the federal parliament. However, I think it's also fair to say that perhaps the biggest issue in this city today, subways or LRTs, and I'd like to know where you all come down on that. What's your view?
Subways or LRTs. Subways are actually the most economical, but only where there's the density to support it.
Is there the density to support it across Eglinton into Scarborough?
No.
There is not?
There is not.
So you'd be against that?
I think that everybody knows that proposed subway line will never pay for itself.
So you disagree with Mayor Ford on this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think...
So I have two opinions on this. First of all, I think that the federal government should be a partner and invest as much as they possibly can in transit. It will result in a huge reduction in carbon emissions.
Absolutely.
And it will make our lifestyles much better. And we'll have cleaner air in our cities. And, you know, we'll get a return on the investment in our improved health. So, but if we have the federal government and the province and the city all trying to, you know, argue their way into, you know, influencing what we do in this city, it'll just be a quagmire. And today it's a mess. I think the federal government should trust the city and the province to figure out the most efficient way to move the largest number of people with the greatest return on investment. And so, personally, I think the federal government should stay out of it.
Stephen Harper was here the other day and he said that very thing.
Exactly.
He said it's not my decision, I'm not...
I actually, my opinion, I like Transit City, and I think we can move more people further, faster.
So LRTs for you?
It's about 50 kilometers of LRT and 25 of subway, and the subway's not in the most efficient place.
You would also oppose Rob Ford's plan then?
I would, yeah.
Okay. Craig, your position?
Well, I'm in favor of Transit City, and I believe it's a sign of a reinvigorating democracy that City Council has been pushing back the way they have. I can't disagree with both points about why transit is so important environmentally for health, but also for productivity. The more gridlock you get, the more downtime you have for people in their businesses and in their working lives. Even things that seem like a small thing, which is actually getting from childcare to school to your workplace and trying to manage all that as a young family, depends on transit. And you get a lot of frustrated people in this city with respect to transit gridlock and car gridlock. So I honestly think that Transit City has been thought through. It has the idea of healthy communities at the center of it, not just funding, but also the fact that we actually don't have the funds that Mayor Ford thinks we have as part of a more prudential approach.
When Prime Minister Harper was here the other day with Jim Flaherty and Mayor Ford making an announcement down on the waterfront, he was asked, subways or streetcars, LRTs, and he said subways. So he stayed on Mayor Ford's side on that one. However, when asked, do you have a role in this? He said, no, this is for the province and the city to work out. Do you agree that there's no role for the federal government here?
I think that the federal government should set some guidelines. We do need, it should be something that reduces emissions. It should be cost effective. To me, another very big third priority, and that has to do with a lot of what's happening in Toronto-Danforth, is there has to be public input. One of the flaws that I found with Transit City is that it was kind of imposed on our riding. We are already becoming the graveyard for all transit storage for the entire city. It was just thrown on us. You know, more adequate discussion with people about how things work, even in terms of safety. We're now building streetcar. The streetcar yards will lead up Leslie and conflict directly with hundreds of postal trucks traveling that route, and there's been a number of fatalities. That could have been fleshed out before. They just decided that that's where it's going to go.
Well, there's absolutely a role for the federal, at the federal level for urban public transit.
What's the role?
Well, the role has to do with the degree of stable funding. If only seed funding, the NDP has proposed 1 cent off the gas tax to actually go to urban transit, and also incentive schemes for employers to actually get their money back in the tax system if they're actually paying for the transit passes and other things of their employees. Those are ultimately fairly modest things, but put into the scheme of a broader national transit strategy, such as Olivia Chow has been proposing, there is a role, but it does also need to get a bit segmented. You have provincial, federal, and municipal jurisdiction. Cooperation, Grant was talking about this correctly before. A degree of cooperation and coordination is part of it, but the feds can't vacate the field.
So we need to trust that the city's going to get the best experts they can possibly find on transit, the best engineers, and come up with a solution. Obviously, the federal government, there has to be some checks and balances, attached to a check. But I don't think they should be really sticking their nose in there and saying you have to do it this way because our experts say you should. There has to be trust in the local government to know the city best.
One of the things the Harper government has offered is a tax break if you use the transit system a lot. You in favor of that?
Outstanding.
You like that idea?
Yeah.
How about you?
Absolutely. Or, free transit passes for employees, making that tax deductible. I mean, there are federal tax breaks for providing cars to employees. Really, if you're going to give those kinds of tax breaks, why not fund transit passes? Why not fund bicycles?
Well, they give tax breaks for transit passes. I want to find out if you're on side with that too, though.
Sure, and absolutely, in its generality, and also the particular issue of tax credits for actually helping your employees use public transit.
Can I just understand this? You three agree with the Harper government's position to give tax breaks for people to ride the subway.
Get absolutely everything wrong.
Okay, but you've all agreed with one thing Stephen Harper's done here. We've got that on record. Yes? Yes, sounds like it. Okay.
Yes.
You wanted to add, though?
No, that's
No,
good.
that's it. Okay. All right, good. Let's talk some politics here, gang. Craig, if you win, well, even if you don't win, you're going to have a say in who the next leader of the federal NDP is. Who should it be?
I've honestly not decided.
Come on.
No, seriously.
You've got a week left,
Well, actually, I'm only going to have 2 or 3 days because after the by-election, I'm going to give myself 2 days to actually put together a lot of the pieces that have been fragmented. I've been focusing on nothing but this by-election. There are 4 or 5 candidates who are still right on my radar screen. And one of the most important things to know is that this has actually been a process that's brought a lot of talent to the surface. And when you're paying enough attention to see that talent, you don't decide quickly and easily. That's my perspective. So I haven't decided. I'll be voting on the 24th like everybody else.
Who's in the mix for you?
Well, come on, Ray.
There's seven people running, so you've said 4 of them are in the, so you've ruled out 3 already. So who's in the mix?
I would rather not say.
Oh, come on, don't be, you've become a politician already. We haven't even got to March 19th.
I'm coming after you next. Just wait, Grant.
I know.
He can talk about the fact that you're going to have a leadership race in 2014, only a year before
I'll get to him. Just don't worry about him. I'm still working on you.
You know, it's quite obvious that folks who've done extremely well in the last little while and that are on everybody's radar screen include Mulcair, and Nathan Cullen. Nikki Ashton has impressed incredibly. So these are just 3 examples of people who are ready. We have to keep in mind the level of French. And so Peggy Nash and Brian Topp also have that.
So Paul Dewar's out then. His French isn't good enough.
Paul would pick up the French. I do believe he would pick up the French. The question is whether the membership believe that we have that luxury at the moment with the Quebec base. He has picked up support from 4 Quebec MPs, or 2 at the moment. I think there might be 2 others coming out, to say that his French is good, but needs to improve, but he's seeking to improve. So it is a factor. It's become a factor, and Paul's doing his very, very best to say to folks, give me some time. But the others who are ready are the ones I listed in terms of French.
I'm interested that you haven't mentioned Brian Topp's name. Brian's from Quebec. He speaks French perfectly.
I meant Brian as well, of course.
So he's on your list as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, because you didn't mention him.
It wasn't intentional.
Okay, let's just, wanted to clarify that. Okay, your turn now.
Bring it.
Here we go. The so-called interim leader of your party is Bob Rae.
Yes.
A lot of people think he's not that interim. What's your view on whether Bob Rae should lead your party into the next federal election?
Well, my view is, first of all, he is doing a remarkable job. And I think there are a lot of people who would agree with me. I'm hearing it in our riding an awful lot. He's really the unofficial leader of the opposition. The media goes to him right after Stephen Harper. And it's very noticeable because he's incredibly articulate and very wise. And I think he's doing a phenomenal job. Do I think he should be the automatic leader of the party? No.
I didn't say automatic, but do you think he should be the leader?
I don't know who else is running, so right now I do.
Is there anybody out there you would prefer to him as the next leader of the party?
Not presently. I don't know who would be interested in the job right now anyway.
Well, we know the names that are out there.
Well, I think there's probably a breadth of talent we're not aware of as well.
He took the job, if I recall, under the condition that he not run for the permanent position. That's his understanding of it. He's never forsworn any desire to run for the job. He hasn't said he would, he hasn't said he wouldn't, he hasn't answered the question at all. Do you think he needs to make absolutely abundantly clear that he has no intention of running for the permanent position?
I think, does he need to make that abundantly clear now? Mm-hmm. I don't think so. I mean, he said at the beginning, I'm not going to run. There may be a lot of people who beg him to run. The constitution of the party could be changed.
And if that happens, you'd be content with that?
His running?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You would?
Absolutely.
Be. Okay. Your turn.
My turn.
Yeah. Not everybody's thrilled with Elizabeth May. You think she should lead the party into the next federal election?
Yeah, I do. I think she's great, and I think most people in this riding really love her, which is why one of my competitors here actually wants to pretend that he has her endorsement. And I love the fact that, I mean, if you want another Green like Elizabeth May, that's me. It's really nobody else.
Okay, that's a
but I
reference
do
that
think
we didn't get. Explain that reference. He's got Elizabeth May's endorsement.
No, he does not.
Do you want me to
But I do want to just say
Well,
that I find it
clarify
really
that.
funny. I do find it really funny that that right now what we've got is two parties each saying we're really the best opposition, and you've got a Liberal. Neither of them have a leader at the moment. The Liberal Party's probable coming leader is a New Democrat, and the New
Who's that? Bob Ray?
The New Democratic probable leader is a Liberal.
Mulcair.
And a Liberal who toyed with being a Conservative, and an interim leader who's a separatist.
That's absolutely true. That's
They approached him.
a complete.
We're going to clarify all this. Let's clarify all. Go ahead, Craig
That I
first.
think is very important for the sake
You
of.
want to explain the background?
Very quickly.
Explain the background.
No. The claim that Mr. Mulcair flirted with being a Tory, no. He flirted with assuming a position on the environment after he resigned in principle from the Liberal government of Quebec. There's nothing in the record to suggest that he was flirting with the Tories
No,
to
they
become a
approached
member
him.
of the party. Exactly. So I think it's really important that people listening to this do not get that impression.
Let's come back to this. But before I say anything, I want to say Elizabeth May, I completely admired her when she supported Stéphane Dion's green shift.
Sure.
I completely admired for that. She wanted cap and trade. She knows it's the only way
She
we're
does
gonna,
not. No.
Well, in terms
Sorry,
of Stéphane
Dion had a carbon tax, not a cap and trade mechanism.
I'm sorry. Virtually very similar.
No, they're
ideas.
not very
Well,
similar.
put
They're
a
actually
price-
quite a bit different.
They put a price on carbon, and you can argue till you're blue in the face which one is going to have more of an impact.
No, you can't.
But
You can't. If you talk to the experts, if you talk to the
Let's
climate
just go back to
scientists.
this.
Can we understand?
So can I just say-
Did May endorse you or not?
No.
No, and
So
I
what are
never
you
said
referring-
she endorsed
so
me.
what are you referring
But I
to?
just wanted to say something nice about her because I think she's great. She knew that Stéphane Dion's green shift was progressive and it was going to alter the trajectory of carbon emissions very quickly in this country if it had gone into effect. And I admire her for putting aside her party and saying, I agree with that. It's the right thing for the environment. The NDP did not agree with it. And I thought that was a tragedy.
And then your party abandoned it.
Now-
So what's the...
I'm going to bring it back. Now,
No, you won't. You're going to vote along with your leader, whatever he
no,
says.
No. Now listen.
can't.
So listen to the new
You're gonna
Liberal
be a
Party.
backbencher.
So listen to this. So when I won the nomination, I proposed an idea. I said, would it be okay if I wrote all my campaign literature and designed it? And the party said, sure, we believe in your values. We know that you align well with the Liberal, your small L values. Liberal values align very well with the capital L Liberals, and go for it. And I really wanted to be authentic. I wanted to express myself on the page, the way I speak, everything I feel.
I saw it. It was very clever.
Well, thank you. So I did slip in. I like to be cheeky. I like to have
It
fun.
was very cheeky. Yeah.
Well, that's kind
You
of
want
what...
to take 30 seconds and explain what it said.
Okay, so it said, I was listing on one of the panels kind of my background and the people I've worked with. And Elizabeth May once said that I was a creative genius. Now, I'm not sure that I always am, and my wife would definitely not agree with that comment, but I thought it would be cheeky to put it in.
She's a former TV host, so I agree with her. Anyway, keep going.
And so, and I've worked with Elizabeth in the past. We did some very successful projects together, and I thought it would be cheeky to put it in. In no way does it say that she's endorsed me. She's obviously endorsed you. You're an important part of her party, I'm sure. So let's just get it straight.
Gang, with 2.5 minutes to go here, I want to ask you each one more question. The fact is the Conservatives have a majority in Ottawa right now, so the result of this by-election won't change that at all. They will the day after this by-election takes place. So some people could conclude, as a result, it doesn't really matter who wins this by-election. It's not going to be them. We know that. They haven't won this riding in 50 years. It doesn't really matter which one of you wins it. Craig, first, explain to people why it matters that the NDP takes this as opposed to one of the other two parties.
Well, basically because the NDP is positioned to actually remain and act as the official opposition in the way I've been talking about and set things up to make us an attractive alternative for 2015. And I'm a candidate that actually can help that. It's a strong team, but I'm also going to be a strong actor in Parliament. This riding believes in having strong representation. Jack set a very high bar, and the expectations are high. And so I'm hoping that people will see that as part of what they want to do.
Why does it matter that the Liberals take it as opposed to the Greens or the NDP?
Two things. I'm not sure I agree with what you're saying, Craig. Bob Ray seems to be leading the charge in Ottawa. I think there's...
Grant, you're running here, not Bob.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear, though. I think it's really important we have someone who goes to Ottawa and represents the voice of the riding. But I also think there are a lot of problems in our riding. There are children going to school hungry. There are youth unemployment. There are new Canadian families who are really upset about the cuts and they're not sure how to get help. We need someone, a maverick in the riding who creates programs, who tries to bring the community together to build it. And I think we can solve our own problems until 2015. At least we can solve some of them. We need ideas. We need a fresh voice. We need someone rallying people together.
I need to save 30 seconds for Adriana. Go ahead.
I think that it doesn't really matter if the other parties get another seat. It would make a huge difference to Canada, to our children, to the planet if we got another Green in Parliament. And I would be able to speak out in our riding, for our riding, like none of the other parties could, as somebody who comes from a party that demands a bigger voice, as somebody who comes from a party that really does respect that old parliamentary tradition of diverse voices. I can speak out on every bill. I can put forward amendments. None of these others can, as backbenchers.
I introduced you all in alphabetical order, and I will say thank you to all of you in alphabetical order. Grant Gordon, who's representing the Liberals in Toronto-Danforth, Adriana Munyato-Hamu, the Green Party of Canada in Toronto-Danforth, Craig Scott, representing the New Democrats in Toronto-Danforth. A reminder, we invited the Conservative candidate to be here. He declined our invitation. Thanks to all of you, and as we say to the good people in Toronto-Danforth, and as they say in Cook County, Chicago, vote early, vote often. Good luck to all of you on Monday.
Thanks.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.